Granblue Fantasy has a high-octane action RPG called Relink, and over the weekend they released a massive expansion for the game, so naturally I had to jump in and try it myself. If you haven't heard of Relink, it's a really fun game with a huge roster of characters and tons of bosses to challenge you. And with this expansion, that only became more true. Immediately when I booted up the game, I had to grab one of the new characters, Frau. She has a pact with the devil, but not the one from the Bible, the one from the tarot cards. And that devil may or may not end up crying throughout this story. In this game, you can play most of the content co-op with your friends, which is awesome, but they've also introduced a new mode called Conflux, which is purely single player, and it's like a roguelike. You progress through different stages, are given different paths, and after clearing most floors, you're given an option of buffs to take, some of which can have some pretty big downsides. Overall, this mode is really cool. It's got paths where you just fight a bunch of enemies, or waves of enemies, or even one where you have a time limit to get as many enemies down as you can. Beyond that, there are different routes where you play Spot the Difference, or you know that thing where you have to keep track of one item as it moves around and tries to confuse you? They have that too. And then there's the Wheel of Fortune. Anytime I'm given this path, I will always take it, because you spin the wheel and get free stuff. Plus, the chests that spawn in the room are pretty nice. Every 3 or 4 stages, you fight a mini-boss, and then at the very end, you fight a big boss. They have various conflux levels depending on how far into the game you are, so for me, these first few were pretty easy. It didn't really start to get challenging until Conflux 5. This is the very last one, and it's got a special surprise for you at the end. Upon beating the last boss of this Conflux, you're challenged by the guy creating these chaotic rifts, Beelzebub.
Let's have some entertainment, shall we? Dance.
He likes to throw balls at people, and they were confusing me for a long time, but it turns out if I just read the objective, it would have explained a lot. He has this red ball that he generates and tosses at you, and I kept trying to dodge it. Turns out you can't. You have to block it. Then he has a yellow ball of the same type, and that one you need to dodge. So he can mix you up by making a red ball or a yellow ball, and then you have to react accordingly, which I think is really cool. About halfway through the fight, he starts breaking the walls of the arena, attempting to drag you down into the abyss below. Those walls remain broken for the rest of the fight, and from there on out, a lot of the attacks that Bubs can do will inflict a lot of knockback, so I had to be really careful about my positioning. Once he gets down to 15%, he has a huge DPS check, but I managed to skip that completely here. Don't worry though, this was just the tutorial fight, so we'll be seeing more of his mechanics very soon. When it comes to the actual raid content outside of the Conflux, there's a lot to dissect. Every single fight is either a remix of an old battle with entirely new mechanics, or a brand new fight altogether, like this sumo crab. The goal of this fight wasn't to deal damage. In fact, this dude took 1 damage from every single attack. Instead, all attacks inflicted a bit of knockback, and it was kind of like a power struggle. He could knock you off of the arena, but you could knock him off as well. Every time you knocked him off, it would take a chunk off of his health bar. It was such a unique concept to this game, and this was one of the very first fights, so I couldn't wait to see what else was in store. Oh yeah, the boss also dropped a unique sigil, something you can equip, that levels up based on how many times you've done that sumo fight, which is just awesome. As I progressed, every single fight felt refreshing with something new to learn or experience, and I could tell that things were leading up to something big. Before that though, I gotta talk about how building up my character felt. In original Relink, building felt extremely restrictive. You wanted to stack damage as much as possible, and there was even a weapon that said, hey, you have to have below 45,000 health to get a huge boost to damage. 45,000 really was not a lot, and most enemies could dish out that much damage in a single hit, so you never really had any room for leeway. In contrast, Endless Ragnarok adds summons, which give you more sigils to free up slots in your grid. They added transcendence for weapons, which allowed you to move away from the one weapon that demanded you have low health. And to top it all off, they added style ranks, 3 unique trees that kind of change up how your character plays. Inside each one had various buffs like critical hit rate or more damage, and all of these things made it so that you could actually spare some sigils for survivability in your grid. Since they moved away from the ideology of you getting one shot equals difficult boss, they created difficulty in a unique and interesting way that made the game feel fair while also challenging. The first endgame boss I had to face off against was Primeval Proto-Bahamut, a brand new take on Proto-Bahamut from the base game. In the original fight, he had this drawn-out section where he was flying far away and you just had to shoot at him with cannons for a while. Every now and then he would come in for attacks, but for the most part, he stayed at a distance. This new rendition completely flips it on his head. There's not a moment where Proto-Bahamut isn't in your face. He's always using this big blast called Supernova, and he has these crystals you have to destroy. A cool thing about one of the Supernova attacks he does is that it follows the player, meaning you can lead it towards one of his own crystals and have him do the work for you. Another neat thing he does to change up the fight is make these balls. Actually, what is with all these bosses and balls? Anyway, once one of his breath attacks touches a ball, it explodes in a ring of light that you have to either jump over or dodge. But it gets even trickier once he uses his most powerful version of Supernova that constantly tries dragging you into it. If you jump, you get dragged further in, so you don't want to jump to avoid the ring of light, which means you have to react and dodge it, and it comes out really fast. Also, if you fail to destroy one of his crystals, very bad things happen. The next major player we had to contend with was The World. Again, like the tarot card, but you can just call him Pepsi Man, or if you're a fan of Final Fantasy IX, call him Ozma. This guy was brand new to Endless Ragnarok, and he was insanely fun. Lore-wise, he controls the power of all the other tarot cards, and that's represented throughout the fight by him calling upon the various powers like Judgment, Justice, and even the Devil. A bunch of his scripted attacks wound up feeling straight out of an MMO, which I can't complain about. It was very fun and interesting to try and figure out what was going on or what I needed to do at any given moment. Blending MMO-style obstacles and puzzles into an action game feels pretty good. His first phase was mainly a tutorial to get you familiar with his general moveset, and then there was a bit of survival before phase 2 began. This is where a majority of the fight actually takes place. He starts doing fake-outs with his punches, teleporting away, leaving a black hole in his wake, and calling upon the power of the various tarot cards more and more. Towards the end of the fight, he casts Arcarum, the World Beyond. And for this, you have to contend with 3 sets of cards. The first 2 alternate which one is attackable. The next 2, you have to balance damage between them, otherwise they heal up and retaliate against you. And for the final set, you have Death and Judgment. Judgment is constantly blowing bubbles at you, while Death is counting down. Once it reaches 0, your whole party dies. Now, you have a critical gauge, which actually determines if you lose a fight, so you don't automatically lose from going down, but that was still insanely dangerous. I had the foresight to summon a dragon in the perfect position to have a beam pierce all of the cards though, so I really didn't have to deal with most of those mechanics. Once he showed all of his cards, me and the crew teamed up to take him down. Next up on the chopping block was Siete and Twain, 2 Eternals, part of the strongest crew in the skies. This was a duo boss fight, which is notoriously something they did pretty badly in the base game. Fortunately, they learned from their mistakes, and this fight rocks. It starts out with both of them, and then partway through, it becomes just Twain. After you deal enough damage to her, a couple phases go by, and then you fight Siete by himself. For the grand finale, they both come back on the field, but even when they're both out, they kind of just work together and never overlap stuff too much. So top to bottom, cinematically this fight was beautiful and mechanically very fun. Once we defeated them, I had the choice between 3 different bosses, and I decided to do probably Granblue's most iconic villain first, Lucilius. In the base game, there are two iterations of this fight, one that's reasonable and one that for a long time was just absurd. You had 10 minutes to clear it, he had time stop abilities, and everything was awful. It was a great fight, and I have done that fight way too many times. I even have it posted as a members video on this channel. So this new Lucilius incorporates both versions of the fight from the base game and merges them into one. A really cool detail is right at the start of the fight, he begins casting the End. You have to deal enough damage to raise his stun bar and knock him out of it. And for those of you who don't know, that's a reference to his actual raid in Granblue Fantasy proper. The hardest iteration of the fight has you start out with him casting the End, and if you don't deal 30 million damage on that turn, he will just wipe your party. In addition to combining his previous fights, they also gave him a new move. He can make his swords comically large, slam them down to cause you to flinch, and then sweep the arena. They're pretty easy to jump over and air stall though, so it wasn't too dangerous. At around 50% health once he started using his time stop shenanigans, it felt like the real fight began. He would use an attack, freeze it, start up another strike, freeze that one, have the first attack reverse, and then try and hit you with a big beam. Like, he was doing so much. But I was familiar enough with his moveset that I managed to pull through first try, even getting the max rank on the fight, which I was pretty happy with. Next up, I fought Bahamut Versa Advent. Versa initially served as the final boss of the base game's story. And while he was a really cool spectacle, that's about it. When you had to refight him for materials, it wasn't that great. This new and improved version makes the fight feel a lot more fun. They gave him a new move that has him stay near you so you can actually hit him instead of flying across the arena all the time. He still does that, but to a lesser degree, and the fight is better for it. There's not much else to talk about with him, so all we had left was the real showdown with Beelzebub. At this point, all the training wheels were off, and I still didn't know how to dodge or guard against some of Bubs' attacks. On top of that, while doing certain moves like Smothered Mate or Hail to the King, he started sending up briars on every character's position that would linger there for the rest of the attack. So these things would act as obstacles the further into the attack you got. And if you got tagged by one, it would slow you, essentially ensuring that you would get hit by whatever comes next. At about half health, he starts a big charge called Arch Enemy and puts a giant red ball in the sky. This isn't your typical DPS check because your damage doesn't matter. He puts up a shield that reduces damage by 100%. He literally takes 0, but you can still increase his stun meter. And that's how you break his shield. You get his stun to 100 and everyone performs a link attack. The thing I find really cool about that is how it reflects his raid in the browser game. In there, it's very similar. Once he gets to about half health, he puts up a shield, reduces damage by 100%, reflects damage back at you, and overall becomes a huge menace. Once you break his shield, he sends down the big ball and you have to run away from it. But at 15% health, he does the same thing again, except this time it's called Chaos Legion, his signature move. And breaking his barrier doesn't stop it from charging up. This one is a race to the end. Either you beat him here or he wipes you out. The entire arena turns red from the impending doom overhead, and the longer the timer ticks, the closer the sky comes to falling down on you. It really adds to the atmosphere and tenseness of the fight at that point, and even getting to this point was a struggle. While I managed to do the other two fights first try, Bubs was putting me in the dirt for entertainment. It would have helped if I actually understood to block his red grab thing, but basically I was like, I can't do this right now, he's too difficult. So I played a little bit with friends doing previous content, getting myself a little bit stronger, and then I was finally able to clear the fight. Finally taking out every threat to the sky, there was one more trial left to overcome: the Hexachromatic Hierarch. Once again, based off of a raid from Proper, this fight is awesome. You fight avatars of the different elemental dragons, and their special moves are representative of those dragons' attacks. After subduing the two that challenge you, you get to fight the big man himself, Omnis Zegalith. This dude has a barrier a la Urizen Devil May Cry. Once you break it, he's vulnerable for a time, and then he throws it back up, and you gotta break it all over again. Pretty simple, right? Except at a certain point, he'll kick you away, and you have to fight 2 more of the dragon avatars. At around 60% health, he casts Dom Vita Est, which throws you into a platforming environment where you have to dodge hazards and race to the portal at the end. Then you're thrust into another environment where you gotta do it all over again to reach the boss. The goal is to do all that and break its core before it finishes charging. This entire section felt straight out of Bayonetta's final boss fight, which I found super awesome. You once again get kicked out to face more dragon avatars, but this time you're challenged with defeating a specific one before it can cast its law. Fail and you lose a portion of your critical gauge. Succeed and you heal a portion of it instead. Then once you get back to the big boss, he summons a smaller version of himself for you to fight before you can go back to breaking his barrier. With its attacks, it calls upon the power of each of the 6 wedges, casting fire, ice, lightning, all the elements, everywhere, all the time. Upon getting to the last 30% or so, you're faced with the final trial. The boss puts your critical gauge at next to nothing, when suddenly it shoots back up to full. This is a reference to a certain character, but the game doesn't address it, so I'm not going to either. If you know, you know. Other than that cool interaction, this last little bit plays out identically to before. You beat his minion, you beat him up, and there you go. And that's it for the story of Endless Ragnarok. But once you get back to town, a lot more opens up. Those style ranks I told you about before, you can now jump from level 30 up to 50. More weapon transcendence has been unlocked, and a new difficulty called Defy Infinity with only the hardest fights becomes available. I haven't jumped into those yet, and that's something for a different video. But they all seem really cool. Each one has unique edicts or modifiers that you want to look at and be aware of or even take advantage of to turn the tides in your favor. It all seems really exciting, and I can't wait to sink my teeth into it. But for now, that's all I've got. This expansion has made the game 10 times better, and I feel like everything that they've done with it was done well and done right. So if you've watched this far and you don't own the game, you should get it. It even has crossplay, so it doesn't matter what you have, you can probably play with your friends. Anyway, take care everybody, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. I'll catch you in the next one. Sayonara.